I made a video a while earlier about like everything, all the fundamentals about MBTI that you need to know. And some people complained that it wasn't concise enough. And I was like, what do you mean it isn't concise enough? Like, it's as concise as you can while trying to achieve all the goals that I was trying to achieve. So give it another shot. And this shot, I'll try to make this as fast as possible. Some people said it's possible in 10 minutes. And so I'm really going to be going through all of it and trying to make it as concise as possible. So the first thing I go through is like mentioning the fact that like grass has elements and then cocktails have ingredients, and these ingredients are made out of elements. And in the same way, we can take the brain and we can like cut it into parts to say that the brain is made out of like ingredients. And it is kind of where I go here about like all of this and saying that there are different kind of cocktails depending on the ingredients you put on them. And in the same way, brains function in a way where like we can say, okay, brains, if they're made out of different, let's say, things, you have different kinds of brains, and because of these different kinds of brains, you get different kinds of people. This whole large thing here that I was trying to say, and I mentioned this and this and this, the whole point of this was just me trying to say, okay, there are different kinds of people and types of people, right? That was the whole justification for all of that. And I also justified why specifically types and not like trait theory just in an indirect way. I said that like, I didn't really explain why people couldn't be perfectly balanced, and I'm not going to explain that here either because I'm trying to be concise. But the point is there are types of people, and depending on what your type is, you get different kind of advantages, disadvantages, and so on. And then these types we can split it even further. Beside other types, the types are made up of elements, which is, we could think of them as brain elements or information elements. But before them, there's a few things that come before them, which is the categorization of the information elements or the cognitive functions. One kind will be the observation, one will be the decision making, right? There's two kinds of ways to make an observation, which is to sense something, to be like, hey, this is Arizona. Tasty as shit, right? That was very much sensory, and then I'm just gonna guess that the next time I'm gonna drink it is gonna be pretty tasty, So it's like guessing. The sensing is like about like what's there, what's sensory there, and then intuition is more rather about like a hunch, is about what could be there, and so on. And then I want to explain it through an example. And then there comes decision making. Our decision making is based off two things, which is functionality, thinking what works and doesn't, and then values, what we feel as if is right, and so on. And then based off that, we can start already making some typing systems by using these letters, such as someone who's more into sensing, someone who's more into thinking, blah, blah, blah. And then we can come up with types like sensor, thinker, feeler, intuitive, and so on. And then I explained how there's a rule for like the things. There's always a balance and imbalance in either decision making or the observation, and so naturally the next one is gonna follow the same rule. So you could say that the imbalance in the decision making, and then the balance in the observations. You could say that someone is a thinker, more of a thinker than a feeler, some more of an intuitive than a sensor, and you could concise them down into letters instead of like having to type thinker, intuitive, sensor, feeler. Right? You just do this. And the thing with the imbalances is that when you get an imbalance, you get something really great and then something really horrible. So in the case of the thinker, they're going to have their thinking first, feeling last because of how bad their feelings are, how good their thinking is, and then their observation thingies are going to be in the middle. Intuition is going to be rather higher up because that's what they're better at. Thinking is going to be higher up. Sensing not going to be the worst, but not necessarily the best either. And feeling is going to be the worst. We could do this with more examples, but trying to be concise here. And now here's where it gets complicated. You could imagine functions to be in like radars in a way. Extroverted functions have this quality of like wanting to get more and more stuffies, quantity over quality in a way. While introverted ones rather want to have less stuffies and have quality over quantity. And so like we take the first four things we know of, and then we put introverted, extroverted behind them, and then we get the cognitive functions, the I, N, I, S, I, F, I, T, N, E, S, E, F, E, which are introverted thinking, introverted intuition, blah, 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 extroverted thinking, extroverted intuition, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. And then I go on to be like, all right, here is the definitions for each one of the functions. TI, for example, is what works for me, blah, blah, blah. You can read this for yourself because I'm trying to be concise here. You can also read this for yourself because I'm trying to be concise here. And then here's some rules that allow us to put functions in a way and doesn't. the one thing that I want to do take time to explain is the jumpers a little bit. The reason why jumpers exist, the reason why jumpers weren't acknowledged is because Jung once said that the tertiary must be different than the dominant in every single way possible, and thereby Catherine interpreted that as the tertiary. It's not. It's the auxiliary. Why am I saying tertiary? It's the auxiliary. That the auxiliary function must have opposite extroversion and introversion, and that's why a lot of you Marsians don't, or even Socianists, don't even know that jumpers are a thing, but they definitely are. Especially if you look at the qualities of the functions, such as the organizing qualities and the identity quality, for example. So it would mean that it's impossible for someone have their highest quality as identity and then their secondary quality as organizing, which would be absolutely insane, because we know that there are people in the world who have highest quality as identity followed by organizing. Blah blah blah. Too much fucking jargon. It's difficult to make this shit concise. And there's a bunch of stuff that I've just skipped over that in the original video I didn't, that made the video less concise but more explanatory. But I'm gonna have to skip them now. And then using these definitions that we have learned of, we can already start analyzing what someone's functions are, and what they mean, and what it means to have a function in a certain position as opposed to another. And there's obviously 8, but I chose 4 to try and make it simplified in that one. See, even then I was trying to be concise. And then to each 2 functions that are D and that are also introverted, and then take any other then flip them. You're gonna have relationships. There are functions and they have the relationships. The IFI have identity, TFE have tribe, SENE have gathering, and ISI have the organizing quality. And then we can use the new definitions now and on top of the original ones now to learn more about the person. So the first thing we can say about the INEs, they're fucking narcissistic. Alright, these organizations of the functions are called stacks. And the proportionality, I never explained it, but here what I tried to say is the types never change because the proportionality never changes. Blah 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 blah. Letter code names. This one took the most time. And how long is this video already? This video is already 7 minutes. Okay, we actually got it under 10 minutes so far. So let's try to explain this shit as fast as humanly possible. So how do I explain? This is actually difficult to explain fast. This is what takes the longest time always. So you're gonna if you really want to do this fast, you gotta learn what the 4 stories rules tell you. So the IP, I hope you have learned what the I, OI, OE, DE, DI, OE, OI are. If you haven't, go watch the original video. But if you learn these rules, depending on what type you have, you're always gonna know what the first function is gonna be. So we could already look at the IP, and we know it's gonna be DI first, and it's gonna be DE last. Perfect. And then we can look at the T. We know that the T now will replace the DI because there are 2 kinds of DI, FI or TI. And in this case, it's obviously going to be TI because the T is there. And then if you've learned of the original rule where good at thinking means you're horrible at feeling. So, the feeling is going to be last. So we know this is going to be FE. We just have to figure out the functions in between. Now, what the P tells you is that it's going to be OE. So we know here's something going to be OE. And we can use the N to fill the O because there's only 2 kinds of OEs, which is NE, SE. And then boom, TINE. And now you can use your brain to figure out what would be after the N. In a TNXF, it'd naturally be the S. And since it's an IC, sometimes the C isn't written, you just assume it. We're going to know that the rule is going to be I, so boom. Just here, and then you have the cognitive functions, and this is how it works for normal types. Now I could explain how it works for jumper types very concisely. I mean, not very exactly the specific rules, but instead what I'm gonna do to be concise is I'm gonna tell you just do the normal type. Imagine it was a C type, and then flip the 2 middle functions. So it becomes TISI. If this was a INTP jumper, you just have to do this, and then you have the cognitive functions for the INTP jumper. To go to the 4 stories real quick, IPs are like, oh my god, me versus the tribe. IJs are like control versus chaos. Oh my god, look at the chaos. EJs are like tribe versus me. And then EPs are like, the Matrix is trying to control me. Fuck the Matrix. Alright, here you have it. Concise version. Under 10 minutes. Let's go.